Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Budget Game Reviews. Today's subject of a cheap review is Burai Fighter Deluxe. This is obviously for the Game Boy, and this was released in 1990 and developed by Kid. It came out in the same year that its bigger, non-deluxe brother was released for the NES. Now, as I got this with my Game Boy, this is pretty much all I've got left. There's no manual or box. So all we can really do is jump in and see what made this special. And after that pretty jaunty bit of fanfare, we end up here at the main menu. There's nothing fancy or anything special going on here, so all we can really do is select New Game and Start It Up, which will give us this option screen. This lets us select the difficulty level. No easy, normal or hard here, we've got Eagle, Albatross and Ace. And seeing that shoot 'em ups are not my favourite genre, let's just go with Eagle for now. And as you can see, we're just a single dude against the world, and we're pretty much armed with a pea shooter as well. Though thankfully there are 3 different weapon types for us to pick up. We have Ring, which might have this really annoying sound effect, but it can actually pass through walls, which is very useful in this game, though it won't pass through baddies. Now you might notice at the bottom of the screen there is 3 letters, one for each of the weapons, and it's also got a number next to it. And that's because you can charge the weapon up by picking up the same capsule multiple times. You can go all the way from 0 to A, which coders will know is actually 10. Your gun will go through 2 major upgrades. The first when you hit 5 pickups, and the second is obviously when you hit 10. The first upgrade will allow you to fire in front and behind you, and that is based on where you're aiming at the time. And the second will give you a spread shot in front of you while still having that one pointing behind you. Now the one thing to remember about the ring shot is that it's not the most powerful of all the weapons, it's actually at the lowest tier. Well, it's just above the pea shooter at least. The next weapon is the laser, which has a slightly less annoying sound effect, but is actually more powerful than the ring. Though it won't go through walls, but it will go through enemies, and as we can see it will actually shoot in the direction that you're pointing. Its first upgrade is very similar to the ring, in which you'll fire a shot in front and behind you. Its final upgrade is at least a bit more interesting, as it will fire 4 shots but at a diagonal to where you're pointing. So if you actually want it to fire at the cardinal directions, you have to actually aim at an angle. Which leaves us with the final and most powerful weapon upgrade, the missiles. At its first level, it will always fire to the right. This does mean that at least at the lower levels you can actually fire in 2 directions, but the fact that it won't go through walls or through enemies does make it a bit more limited. As you might expect, the first upgrade allows you to fire 2 missiles, which will always go to the left and right of you. And the final upgrade, obviously, will fire in the cardinal directions. As we can clearly see, the game is an auto-scroller, which was pretty common for shoot 'em ups at the time, though you can push the view around a bit if you move to the edges, which is needed to find some of the pickups as they'll hide them just off screen, which turned out to be a side effect of the fact that it was ported from the NES and they couldn't show the entire screen as they would have done on that console. Though I have to say I still think it's a cool idea. What's also quite cool is the scroll direction isn't fixed, as sometimes it will suddenly lurch to another direction and you'll have to keep up with where it's currently going. It can be quite difficult as they can quite easily trap you behind a bit of wall. At the end of each level, the screen will go white, the HUD will vanish, and it'll just be you in the gauntlet. There'll be waves of bad guys, there'll be obstacles, and if you're lucky there might also be some weapon power-ups, because what you're going to be facing next is the end of level boss. And you'll know it's time that you're going to face it when the HUD fades back in again. And these bosses do vary quite a bit, with the first level being the Crab. Whose weak spot is quite obviously its eyes. Thankfully, if you bring the right weapon into these boss fights, they're not too difficult. And to be honest, most of the time, you can pretty much guess it's going to be the ring. Now, as you might imagine, each level is pretty much themed and comes with its own obstacles and traps for you to deal with. On the second level, that means there's spinning balls and having far more complex environments for you to try and traverse. Now, you might have noticed when you destroy some enemies, they'll drop this weird looking animated icon. If you collect enough of them, it'll actually give you a bomb, which you can see in the bottom left hand corner. Now, this is your typical screen clearing affair, though there is one special trick to it. If you manage to collect enough of these smart bombs, and you get it all the way up to the letter E, you'll actually get an extra life, though it does use up all the smart bombs, and so you have to start again from scratch. The third level introduces us to something new, falling blocks. And don't just think it's just one block that will fall. As soon as it's triggered, it will keep falling all the time, so you really have to be on the lookout, as this map does get quite tricky for you to navigate. Every so often you'll actually come across one of these capsules that has a star in it, and if you manage to pick it up, it will actually give you access to one of the hidden rooms. Now, it might move the screen back to where you were a second ago, but the layout will be different, or it might actually move you to a completely different part of the map. Though what you will typically find is some bonus items, whether it is the B capsule, which I think just gives you bonus points. I think in the NES original these were actually speed boosters rather than just bonus points, but more often than not you will actually find some weapon upgrades along the way. As I've mentioned before, this is actually a port of a NES game, and actually came out not too long after the original title. And as you can imagine, it wasn't a complete one-to-one port. The speed, the number of levels, and even the level layouts themselves were tweaked to work better on the Game Boy, which does mean overall the game is a bit shorter than its big console equivalent. But you know what, I actually do think this game does stand up on its own. Yeah, it is missing some of those top-down levels, but what is here is a lot of fun, and that's coming from someone who's not a big fan of shooters. Now, there is one other power-up that I've not mentioned so far, which is the spinning ball. If you manage to find one, it will orbit around you and manage to take out any baddies that it hits. Now, it looks like if you pick up multiple, you won't get more of them, but instead it will move around a bit faster. And I have to say, this game has an absolutely great soundtrack. It just gets stuck in your head and it'll be there for days, particularly that first level. My only gripe with the music is the fact that you don't get to hear all of it when you're firing your weapon, as it drops one of the audio tracks, though it does at least encourage you to stop firing. It seems this is one of those games that has different endings depending on your difficulty level, and if you pick the easiest, like I did, well, guess what you're gonna get? It's not a lot. Now, something I only just recently found out was they actually did a colour version of this game for the GBC, called Burai Fighter Color. Though the US version was renamed to Space Marauder, and the basic menus are pretty much the same. Eagle, Albatross, Ace, and when you get into the game, well, it looks pretty much identical, apart from obviously all the additional colour, and there is a bit more detail in here as well. Though what you can feel from the very beginning is that this is a much faster version of the game. It also seems they've added a few extra baddies as well, so this one is actually worth tracking down if you can. But for now, I think I'm going to go back to my original cartridge. So until next time, I've been the Goldfish, that's been a game that I'm still not entirely sure how you're meant to pronounce its title, and this has been Goldfish on Games. Thank you for watching this budget game review, I do hope you enjoyed it. And if you've got memories of this game, good or bad, I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. And if you really enjoyed the video, then there's buttons below that you know what to do with. Or if you're not sure yet, then there's 2 other videos on screen that you can check out right now.